Hello and welcome to this week's Back Chat from the Arc in Headingley, and as ever, a fantastic panel of guests with us today. Julia Lee, a former referee, the first ever women's referee in the men's game, not only in Rugby League but in any sport going. We'll be hearing more of her story as we go through. Lois Forsell, who's the Leeds Rhinos women's skipper and also an England international, twice a World Cup final appearer as well. And Karen Moorehouse, who's with us from the RFL, Director of Operations and Legal. And you'll have noticed something very significant about this week's panel. No Gary Schofield, so here's a Thursday night we can all enjoy. Right, welcome, thanks very much for joining us. Let's start off with the talking point of the week. And Karen, I'm going to throw this straight to you, because the Tompkins brothers, that video nasty, life behind bars, none of us enjoyed watching it. What did you make of all of that and how it's been dealt with since?
Yeah, clearly behaviour completely unacceptable, not something you expect from Super League players. I'm sure both of them are really embarrassed about their behaviour and what's now being spread across the newspapers. I think Wigan, the club, have dealt with it really well. They've dealt with it quickly and sent out a strong message with the punishments that they've imposed on both of the players. So I think the club should be acknowledged for the manner in which they've dealt with the incident. This
is your remit within the RFL, so do you pick up on this at all, or do you leave it go now because of the way Wigan have dealt with it?
Yeah, of course we look at these incidents of this nature. The club are the employers of the players, so primarily we leave these matters to be dealt with by the club, and where they deal with them correctly, then beyond warning the players and reminding them of their responsibilities as professional players, as role models, we don't tend to take any further action from a governing body perspective.
So Julia, how uncomfortable were you watching that video?
I was more uncomfortable that the Rugby League public was sharing it, to be honest, and the publicity around it. It obviously was unacceptable behaviour. They're out on a night, you don't know when it is, you don't know the context. But we all do silly things, we all do things that we regret, don't know the context of the night, why they did it, but also the personal views of the players and just thinking about them and how they would feel about their image. And I know the professional Rugby League players, but how devastated they probably are that that's actually gone out live and the light that it shines onto them and Rugby League. It was just shocking, really. I didn't share. If it comes on my social media, it usually means it's far and wide. So I knew that it was a big story. And, I'm more concerned about the health and well-being of the players, to be honest, after that as well. How the reaction of they're going to be, and making sure, one, yes, the club needs to deal with it from a disciplinary point of view, but also their health and well-being, about the aftermath of how they've behaved, what the impact's then going to be on them in their lives, really.
Yeah. Well, we'll come back to that in just a second. Lois, I mean, one of the arguments in their favour, in their defence, so to speak, is that they were just unlucky. That they were on a night out, they'd had a few to drink, but other players, other people in society could easily be caught out in that circumstances.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, they are players and they've got to take that on board, that they do have that role model status to uphold, but at the end of the day they are human and they are going to go out and I think that they have, I wouldn't say being unlucky, but they are going to take that and carry that heavily themselves, and I think that the people who are going to be most bothered by it is them. And like you say, I think sharing it doesn't help, because we've all been there, made mistakes. I think it's one that they'll probably learn from, but it's one of them, it's just tough for them. They know where they are and they know what their status is, but everyone makes mistakes, and like you say, you don't know the context of it, you don't know what's happened before or after. But I think it is important that they may be supported and deal with it well.
Compare and contrast this though, Karen, with the situation with Albert Kelly at Hull. We saw a video, similar circumstances, in terms of it was a phone film that was made of him, not in the best of behaviour, and Hull buried that. There was no public announcement from Hull like there was from Wigan. There was hardly a flicker from Hull. Have they done it better in terms of protecting the game's image because they buried it within, or should they have handled it differently, do you think?
I don't think it was either club's choice in terms of how viral each of those incidents went. I think each of the clubs have dealt internally with the players as they saw appropriate. And they've made their own decisions on whether to make those sanctions public or not. Just coming back to the point of Julia and Lois, I think it's getting the right balance. I think we've all got to be clear that videos like that are completely unacceptable. they send out the wrong message for our sport, and it's really important that sanctions are imposed, because we want to make sure that people want to come and watch our game, that parents want to send their kids to play the game, and that's not the advert we want for it. Of course, behind the scenes, what we must also do is provide support for the players involved, but it's getting the balance between those two things.
Yeah.
And we do, one of the great things about our sport is we do have such a strong player welfare policy. Every club has a player welfare manager, and I've got no doubt that Wigan's player welfare manager at the moment is providing all the right support to the Tompkins brothers around the incident.
But just going back to, Wigan have come out and said, totally unacceptable. Very strong quotes from Chris Widlinski.
Yeah.
This is the wrong image for not only the youngsters in the town, but for the youngsters within our team. Club culture, disgusted by what he saw. Should Hull have not done something similar with the Albert Kelly situation?
I think each club's got to decide what's right for them, what's right for their club, and how they feel best to manage the incident, and you've got to deal with just how things unfold before you.
Yeah. It's a game of a problem, Julia. I mean, we've got the Zakada situation, and he's coming back to Wigan now, and you know, he's not going to be a bad boy anymore, but does the game have a growing problem, do you think?
I think it's a societal problem. I don't just think it's a game problem. And I think as a sport we deal with it very well. We don't hide it. And I think out there's drugs, there's alcohol, and I do a lot of work with young people now, and it's just at a drop of a hat they can be able to get hold of things. I think within the Male Super League, they've got a hold of it, and there are times when players can go out to drink when they can't. I think in the days when I was watching it, it was a problem. You know, they were out and they were drinking before games, whereas now it's in a controlled environment. I think in the Women's Super League, and it'd be really interesting, you know, they're amateurs at the end of the day in the Women's Super League who've been put on a platform to be able to be in a Super League, yet they've still got their lives to lead, they've still got the whole things to be able to deal with, being able to go out and socialise, and has that professionalism actually come into the Women's Super League? It's something that we really need to look at.
Yeah.
I think it's getting there. I think, like you say, at the end of the day, the Women's Super League's been massive. It's been a real big catalyst for the sport going forward, and I think it will be for the next couple of years. We're getting to that understanding of that the women are community players playing in an elite competition. And I think that there's so many different balances of how the players will conduct themselves and how they're going to manage that balance. So I know, like, I've been involved in the England programme for quite a few years, so my outlook might be different to another player who's not been involved in that setup. And now with the ambassador role, think of it differently. So, like, booking holidays and stuff, I think I go on the 15th of October, the day after the grand final, whereas other people might have holidays pre-booked, or just, you know, they're going to manage that balance. So I think that as we break down the barriers that we've got at the moment and get more familiarity with the competition, the standards will improve, and the players might find a different balance of what they need to do.
Do you feel under more pressure though now? Because I mean, you were saying before, somebody recognised you, and you're getting recognised more now because the women's game is a bigger profile. Do you feel more pressure now that when you're out in public, you've got to behave?
You know, we're a million miles off of where
sure you behave
Sam
anyway.
Tompkins
I'm sure you behave
are and
anyway.
things like that. Yeah, we behave anyways, but we're a million miles off where Sam Tompkins are and things like that. But, you know, little things like at the beginning of the season, at Leeds, we all got, you know, player stash. So you've got your training kit, your match day kit, and it were kind of, we set out because the club has a culture like we're going to spoke there about. And it's, you know, if we go out post-match and you go for some food up at Arc, you know, you don't go out in your Leeds Rhinos jacket, sink 10 pints and then have a burger. You kind of either, if you want to go do that, get changed, but you just got to be accountable of, you know, what you're wearing and the fact that you are a role model. So we're getting very tiny little bits of that into the women's game now, which will hopefully progress over time. But I think it's the same for the men. They learn, and they're all on different curves in their development, same as the women are.
What responsibility does the RFL have in this? Because I think it's great. You touched on it before about the mental health now, and there's a lot more mental health support now. There's a lot more that's out in the open, which is fantastic. That's the afters. What about the befores? I mean, how much responsibility should the RFL have in terms of guidance and codes for players, especially those who are involved in the England setup as well? I mean, what do you do? What do they do?
Yeah, I mean, we have some clear policies around what's expected by way of behaviour. We also work closely with the clubs and, you know, in relation to the women's game with the foundations to try and make sure that that education is passed on. And that ranges from a whole range from your gambling, doping, right through to some stuff like time management. You know, ultimately, we are the governing body, so we want to set the standards. It's then got to be each club who makes sure that's instilled within the players within their club.
Yeah.
And I'm sure kind of each club builds on that so that they've got their own internal codes of conduct about what they expect from people who are wearing their badge.
Yeah, yeah. You work a lot with kids. Is there an impact? I mean, does it might be hard to judge at this point, but Sam and Joel go AWOL in a bar. Does that actually filter down to the kids, and do they feel like they can copy that, or do they realise that this is not the way to behave?
Oh, absolutely. If they see it, they're their role models. So that's why it's imperative that we deal with it at a really high level.
Yeah.
And I think from an RFL and a Wigan perspective, they have done. And that's then stamps out the message that that is not acceptable.
Yeah.
And young people, you know, what they're getting at, it's totally different to what it used to be with the outside influences, the lack of social skills, because a lot of young people, you know, are sitting in the bedroom on computer games and don't come out. So when they see that sort of behaviour, they think that that's actually acceptable. So it is important that, you know, we get the messages loud and clear.
Yeah.
But I think they also understand. I mean, I'm working a lot with the girls in the Girls League. That's a really great initiative that's come from the Super League that we're beginning to develop the girls game. And the pressures that are on them is just huge in society.
In what way?
Just around social media and society. So it's a really good example to them that when you see something like that going viral, but that actually it's really important because they don't understand the concept. I've just recently done a survey with the girls team, and on it was, would you like to find out more, you know, use of digital and social media? And half of them said, no, we don't need any help.
Yeah.
When actually some disciplinaries that I've actually been involved with have been around poor use of social media and them forgetting that it's actually public.
Yeah.
Once they go on social media, Snapchat or Instagram or wherever, it actually becomes public. So it's around them being able to have safe social media around what they do, how they do it, what they say. And I think it can be used as an example. This is what can happen.
Yeah.
So I think used in the right way, it can be used for the good, really,
Yeah.
and particularly for the young people. But yeah, if role models do something, they will think that's acceptable. You see it in football all the time. But I think as a sport, and we've always been really good at it as a sport, and it's something I've always been really proud of in Rugby League, when things happen, which obviously will because people are only human, we deal with it and we deal with it in the right manner.
And you talk about role models, I mean, from your background of refereeing, you must pull your hair out at the abuse that referees get, because that is something that seems to be getting worse and worse at the moment, abusing referees.
Yeah, I get really, really frustrated because people actually don't see the referees as human, and actually social media has allowed it to become, you know, just an abuse-a-thon.
Yeah.
You know, I worked for the last 4 years at the Rugby Football League with the match official department, so I know how hard those match officials train.
Yeah.
I mean, in season, they get a day off on a Wednesday and that's it, and they travel, now there's Canada, they travel to France so often, and it's only a small squad of about 100 referees, right, from Super League right down to the National Conference, so there's not a big panel of referees that are actually doing the games. So some of them are doing 3 and 4 games a week. So yeah, it does frustrate me because everybody's human. I think as a sport, we haven't really taken hold of the laws of the game. As in, last time the actual laws were printed in print was 2014. And from an international federation point of view, they haven't got a copy of the laws, this is the international laws of the game, and they've allowed Australia and the UK to interpret the laws according to what their competition needs, which obviously then creates frustration for fans.
Absolutely.
Because
we're watching 3 different games.
And whereas in, you know, the RFL, Steve Ganson sends out the interpretations, this is how we're doing it this season, this is how we're going to operate, and he does work with Australia on it. They have got a lot better at working together.
I can feel Karen itching to come in here, because that's very much your area as well, isn't it?
I think, you know, one of the big strengths of our game is that we've always had the spirit that you respect the ref, you respect their decision, and you just get on with the game. And I still think the majority of players, the vast majority of players, do that. In those rare exceptions when they don't, I think we're really good in taking really decisive action, be that on the field of play in terms of yellow or red cards where appropriate. And
well,
then
we saw one in the cup, didn't we, on Thursday night?
Absolutely. You know, if you give the referee lip, then you're not on the pitch anymore.
Yeah.
And then equally through the match review panel system, taking really quick action where players are banned. And I think that just sends a really strong, clear message that it's not acceptable in our sport. And where you cross the line, action will be taken against you and it will impact your team. So, and we'll keep doing that. So, you know, there are isolated problems. I don't think we should tar all players at the same brush, because I think the majority of them do respect the ref, they know how our sport works, and we get on with the game.
And I think you're actually right about the respect of the ref, and it's a great sport to be in for that. But I think my frustration is around the interpretation of the laws, and the fact that it frustrates when you're standing on the terraces, which I am more or less, that the different interpretations people have is my frustration. It's not about how the referees officiate at all, because they do a great job with the tools that they're given, and it's been improved over the last 5 or 6 years under Steve Gans, the accountability. So that's absolutely brilliant. But it's just the interpretation, and I feel for the spectators and because it's frustrating.
I'm going to have to stop you there. It's right out of time. First part, but that was part one of Back Chat from the Arc in Headingley. We're back with more chat to come with Julia, Karen and Lois right after this break. Hello and welcome back to part two of Back Chat from the Arc in Headingley. As ever, a wonderful guest list with us this week as well. We've got Julia Lee, former referee, Lois Forsell, Leeds and England international, and also Karen Moorehouse from the RFL. We were talking about refereeing before the game. I mean, the background you're from is obviously refereeing, Julia. Do you feel that the respect for refs is being eroded at this stage? Or is it the same as ever?
I think it's the same as ever. If you look back in history, when I was on the terraces and it was the worst referee ever, and from a spectator's point of view, I think on field the respect is there. And I think that if players do misbehave on the pitch, it's dealt with and they do it respectfully. So I know personally, I don't think there is much difference from how it was in the 80s to how it is now, as in for the respect wise. I think the game's changed. I think in my days, in the 1980s when I was watching and when I was refereeing, Sunday rugby, I used to have 6 players off. There's not even in national conference and things like that, players in the male game have to get up and it's their living. So, they're not wanting to hurt each other as much, and it's just a totally different game now.
Yeah, I know the BBC the last weekend mic'd up Kevin Brown, and Mark Chapman, the presenter, was quite tickled that you could hear Kevin Brown going, sir, 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 talk to the referee all the time. Is that something that's instilled into you as players, or is that something that comes naturally?
I think you learn from the players that you have seen. So obviously I watched the game, watched Leeds, watched a lot of Super League, and you see that they do talk to the referee with respect. And I think it's different when people who maybe watch football more, they find it a bit odd that you do call the referee sir. But I think it's just something that that you do because it's it's the right thing to say. You might occasionally call him ref, but majority of the time it is sir. Yeah. And I think you know that if you do speak to them with any disrespect, that you will be off. Yeah. And I think, I don't know, in my job I end up having to referee loosely, like high school games or whatever, and it's a tough job. I think I respect the job that they've got, because you're basically doing a job when not everyone's going to be happy. There's 2 teams, aren't they? So no one's going to out and out say, yeah, that's the best decision and the correct decision. It's always going to be a mixed bag, I guess.
What did they call you? Did they call you madam?
No, it's always ended up sir.
Did it?
When you were changing between them, they used to say, I'm going to sort this referee out and I'm going to call her this, going to call her that, and then 10 minutes in the game they forgot and it was sir. Yeah. Because they were just used to doing that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And we're seeing I mean, the female game is getting a higher profile now. Across the board, many different respects, but Tara Jones now coming into the Super League ranks. I think she's been an in-goal touch judge, so that's something you'd want to promote.
Definitely. Want to promote women being involved at the game at all levels, be that working at the RFL. We've had Claire Morrow on the board now for nearly 9 years. I joined the board at the start of this year, down through the executive board at club level. You know, when you look at the crowds that we get at our matches, again, one of the real strengths of rugby league compared to some other sports is the fact that we have quite an evenly balanced crowd, men, women, children, families.
Yeah.
Probably one of the areas that we have needed to put some focus on is actually participation, and that's absolutely what we're doing now with Women's Super League being our flagship competition. But what's really great to see is that actually that's driving participation at all levels throughout the game. So record registrations already this season within the women's and girls game, and that's only going to grow and grow, particularly with Lois going out being our ambassador, encouraging more girls to be involved. When they see those role models playing Women's Super League, they're going to want to be involved in the game. So
I think that was the only negative sort of light that was maybe put on the Super League launching, is what's going to happen to all these teams that are maybe going to be impacted. And I know we've worked hard in Leeds to make sure that community game is sustainable and their needs are met as well, and we're working quite closely to make sure of that. But like you mentioned on Tara Jones, we've got one of our girls who plays in our women's first team. She graduated from the 19s, Caitlin Beavers. She referees. We've got Molly Hutchinson, Layla. So I think that the view of how far you can go, whether that be playing or now refereeing or, you know, being a spectator, the opportunities that are there now to, you know, go and watch the women's team, buy a women's shirt. We've had women's, men, women, whatever, saying, you know, can we get the women's shirt anywhere? And I guess hopefully in a couple of years' time we will be at that where you know, we will be able to merchandise some of the things as well. And I just think it's great for everyone, like you say, whether that's spectators or referees or the players, and the participation element.
And I think it's been the same within sort of, I've been doing some work with Hull KR and Bradford, and the Super League has really driven the girls' programmes. And it's really exciting to see Hull KR have decided they're going to start from scratch. You know, so they've got the 14s and 16s, and then Bradford with the Women's Super League. I mean, they get a regular sort of 500-600. You know, faithful that just go and watch the women's game. And then the bit of work that I've been doing with Huddersfield Giants, they're under 19s. You know, it's just been absolutely awesome just to see the girls and it's driven from, you know, the Super League and the girls wanting to be able to achieve from that.
The key bit is that the RFL, in setting up the Women's Super League, in selecting the founder clubs, part of that, it isn't just about having a first team, it's having that commitment to having a programme and a structure below that first team. The RFL have recognised that that's really key. This isn't something that's just for the short term, it isn't just something that's going to be here in 2018 and disappear. It's trying to build up so that you've got that pyramid which keeps growing and growing.
I think that's a really smart move, like you say, with Hull KR and Huddersfield and teams like that. And the RFL, so Hull KR and Huddersfield have started off saying, you know, we're not quite ready for that step to Women's Super League, but we are committed to being a founder club and we will work to get to that point. And that shows that it's not kind of a tokenistic gesture of, we'll just put someone in. They're seeing that there is standards and they've got to be met. And I think, you know, the RFL made a smart decision with Widnes. You know, they work very closely. I know Tom Brindle, who heads up the programme, him and SJ work really closely with Widnes to say, you know, are we there? Is this what's right? And they've come to the agreement that next year will be their year. And I think that this year of them finding their feet will be massive. And I think that ensures that we've got that you know, that standard within the competition and it doesn't become tokenistic. And
I think it really gives something for the young girls and the young women to look up to as well. I know the girls that I've worked with within sort of Hull KR, they can see it as a possible career aspiration. It's not quite there in the community, they don't see it as a career aspiration, but the girls themselves are now beginning to say, well, we could have this as a career.
And of course, you look ahead and go 2021 World Cup in this country. I'm sure that must create quite a lot of excitement within the teams, knowing that you're working towards that competition. We've already gone out publicly and said that, you know, the men's, the wheelchair, and the women's competitions will be run in parallel with equality between them. So that must be driving a lot of enthusiasm in terms of competition for places within that sport.
It's a massive catalyst, isn't it? And it does give those girls that are maybe just turning 16 that real sort of accountability to, if I work hard, this is where I could be. You know, it's been quite a transitional period for the women's international squad on the back of the past 2 World Cups. you know, you've got players that are going to have retired or did retire before 2017. So the RFL are doing a great job with the talent hubs. You know, they've got a real clear development plan going forward of how we need to really buy in and support the young girls coming through. It's about giving them the opportunity to develop and improve, and you know, they can't do that on their own, but they can with the help of the RFL, these national and regional talent hubs that'll just give them that little taste, and hopefully then just get that hunger and keep it going, and they'll want to push on and aim for that 2021 World Cup, which is going to be, you know, absolutely unbelievable on home soil.
Julia Lee, the Rugby League has got a very proud tradition of inclusivity, hasn't it? You know, the first black coach in British sport was a Rugby League coach. Roy Francis back in Leeds back in the 60s, and you know, first I think Ellery Hanley was the first black coach of a national team, and the women's, and you've been involved in the women's side of things for a long time, and as Karen was saying, there's a lot of high profile women within Rugby League who've been there for a long time. You know, in the media I can think of 3 or 4 high profile media people who've been involved in a long time. But when you got involved in refereeing, I mean, was it a difficult climate that you went into, or was that inclusivity already there?
Well, it took them 3 months to decide whether I could join the Referee Society.
Right.
So if that gives you an indication
Right, okay.
of where we were actually at that point, although they deny that now. And you know, it was a different era, smoke-filled room, there was women on, it was all men only, all the events, so dinners that were for referees, wives weren't invited. So for me to suddenly go into that environment, and I had to go to the dinners, it actually created inclusiveness, because then the women that were partners or wives of the referees says, well, we're going to come along. So it actually opened the gate for more women to be involved, sort of from a referee and a participation point of view. I think it was accepting of that I had to referee, because there was no way I couldn't referee, because that's what the law said. However, it was a very difficult journey to take initially, because there was lots of barriers put in my way.
Changing rooms? I mean, did you have...
That was their first thing to me, was where you're going to change. Well, I'll go change, it's not a problem. You know, how are you going to deal with the brawl? Well, it's under 11s, there's not going to be an all-in brawl. Although within the first 2 years I was refereeing in London, and I had my first all-in brawl in my first 2 years, Fulham Amateurs v Fulham Travellers, and I did cry coming off the pitch, which they'd never seen before, because I was a 19-year-old girl not quite knowing how to handle it. So there's all those sort of things, but if you give them the tools, which at the start, what it did drive me to do was I wasn't really given the tools to officiate. So then when I got in the RFL, I worked closely with the match official department and developed the referees training courses, developed the tools, helped other referees so that when they go on the pitch, they're able to referee from the beginning.
Yeah. They've written a play about you.
They have written a play, yes.
Called The Ref. Is it called The Ref?
Yes. Yeah, called Ref. Yes. Playwright Sarah Jane Dickinson from Hull University approached me about 3 years ago, really interested in my story. So we've spent the last 2 years developing the play. She's written the play, although apparently I've interfered far too much with some of the scripts. And it's really exciting. It's comical. There's just 4 actors in it. It's premiering at Hull KI, which is where my journey started, and tells a story of really a young girl who just wanted to be involved in Rugby League and kept being told no, she couldn't because she was a girl, which is what happened in my life. So it's adapted, a lot of adaptations, and about how that journey and the journey I took within the Rugby League, and the barriers I came across from a social and political and personal point of view around every game. I dreaded going out because I hadn't been given the tools to referee. I didn't really know the laws of the game, or I knew the laws of the game but not how to interpret them and referee them. I know that now, but then I just thought it was me not being able to officiate and being rubbish. So the story sort of builds on that, and as I say, it's funny. 4 actors. We're with Red Ladder and a company called Space 2, who are here based in Leeds. We've got arts funding for it, so as I say, we start in Hull, and the next 18 months we're going to be putting the show on in Castleford, Hull, Batley and Featherstone.
Okay, the Women's Super League, I mean, Karen, you talk about the World Cup, you know, the 3 World Cups in one, possibly 4, because I think the Physical Disability Rugby League want to get involved in that as well. I know Adam Hills is pushing that. But what about the Super League? Last year we had a Super League Grand Final, 2 Grand Finals on one day in the same city, one at Manchester City's ground, or training facilities, one at Old Trafford. How long before we have 2 Grand Finals in the same city, at the same ground, back to back?
Good question. I think this year again we're having them in the same city on the same day so that fans can travel and watch both matches. Again, it's something we keep under review. There's always going to be challenges around stadium availability. Obviously playing at football clubs, there'll be concern around pitches, stadium costs, dare I say. But certainly everything we've done this year from the RFL is trying to put the competitions on an equal footing. We had the season launch where we launched Men's Super League, Championship, League One and the Women's Super League on the same day at the same venue, which was really well received by everyone, to send that clear message out of the fact that we think they all sit aligned. Kevin Sinfield and the performance team over at the RFL set up the England Performance Unit, which again is all about running those squads in parallel through one department so that the systems and processes and the support that those squads are receiving are all, as far as possible, the same, so that we're driving forward to 2021 with the ambition that that we win all of the trophies.
Yeah.
You know, it's clearly an ambitious target, but everyone's committed to it and really excited by it.
And you just played in the first round of the Challenge Cup for the women, or the first senior round, isn't it, for the women. What about a Challenge Cup doubleheader at Wembley?
It would be absolutely amazing. Like I say, I think there are always questions around it. I do think there's some bits in the pipeline about it being tied into the men's competition, but I understand from my day job working at Leeds Rhinos Foundation that, you know, you see a vision, it doesn't always mean that it's going to come out like that, and you know, we're taking a step at a time. I get to know quite a lot of the stuff that goes on behind the scenes at the RFL to make sure the women's game is pushed, and I know that if there was something that they could do just like that, it would be done. There's always going to be teething problems, but Rome wasn't built in a day, and I think that the platform that we've got so far this year is absolutely incredible. I don't know where the Challenge Cup final is going to be or when it's going to be. There's been a few ideas thrown about, but it'll be a great day. Hopefully, you know, as good as the grand final were at Manchester. I appreciate that it was on the same day in the same city, not quite the same venue, but you know, playing at Old Trafford, it is like you say, a football ground. There's going to be them discussions around pitch usage and things like that. And I think that we will get there in the next year or two. But as it goes forward, I think that, you know, the movements that's happened has been great, and I think. Yeah. Just looking at the clubs that have got involved, look at the people who are, you know, sat at the top of the tree. I speak quite closely with Gary Everton, and you know, if they're starting to pick up their ears and you know, they're really getting interested in it, they're going to help push forward, and I think it's just going to be everyone pushing is going to get us to the place that we need to be.
Okay, well, we look forward to that. Double headers at Old Trafford, double headers at Wembley as well. Right, that's it for part 2. We're back with more. We're going to be talking about politics in part 3 of Back Chat. Join us then. Hello and welcome back to part 3 of Back Chat from the Arc in Headingley. Wonderful panel as ever this week. We've got Julia Lee, former Rugby League referee, these days a consultant. We've also got Karen Moorehouse, who's from the Rugby Football League, and alongside us Lois Forsell, who's the Leeds captain and England international as well. Let's talk about the game in general for this third part. We sit here on a Thursday every week and grumble and moan about the state of the game. Do you think that there is cause for mumbling and groaning, Lois, about the state of the game at the moment?
I think there's always going to be mumbling and grumbling, isn't there? No, I think, you know, on the back of the World Cup, there were, you know, a fantastic performance from England men, and to get to that final, and they were so close. I think that's got to be exciting ahead of 2021. The introduction of the performance unit, like you say, headed up by Kevin Sinfield, and you know, the England Knights. You look at that squad, and that looks, you know, very, very strong. And then the stuff that's happening with the, you know, the internationals in Denver and things like that, and Toronto kicking on. I think that, you know, there's lots of positives. always can be room for improvement and things like that, but for me, pretty positive outlook.
The politics of the game, though, Karen, are such that we seem to have a game divided at the moment. There seem to be some clubs who want to take it their way, other clubs who don't feel it should go that way, and the RFL stuck in the middle. And we've not heard a lot from RFL leadership in recent weeks. Is that fair?
No, I don't think so. I think there's some really good, healthy dialogue going on between the RFL and the Super League clubs, the Championship clubs and the League One clubs about how best we drive the sport forward. You know, all of us share the same vision, which is that we want more people playing, we want more people watching, both at stadiums and on TV. And there's some really good, healthy dialogue going on at the moment about how we make sure we achieve that. The fact that we're not having those discussions openly in the press, I think is a good thing. It means that everyone can share their views. We can have good, sensible discussions on which bits are right, which bits are wrong, to drive us forward into a better place. So
we talk about the
times.
structure. Are we going to have the same structure next season that we've had this season, i.e. 8s? 12s?
That's part of the discussion.
So it might change next year.
It might change. You know, it's part of the discussions that are going on at the moment to work out what's best for the sport. You know, we've had Super 8s now for, you know, we're into the 4th season of that now. There's some fantastic parts of it. Some of the jeopardy, the excitement, you know, is really compelling. But equally, we've got to listen to people who voice some concerns around it and see what structure is right for our sport and making sure we achieve and stay competitive in the world we live in at the moment, where there's lots of sports trying to attract everyone's attention and other things outside of sport. So we've just got to make sure we're making our sport as big, as bold, as exciting as possible.
Just for the sake of the integrity of the sport, and last one on this, the end of this season is going to be on and into next season, though, is it? If we have £1 million, well, we will. When we have £1 million game, the winner and loser will go down, will stay up. There's not going to be any fudging of the issues in that respect.
No, we've committed to what's happening during this season. The conversations are going on about what the 2019 season might look like, and that was always the plan. You know, we launched a strategy back at the start of 2015, which ran from 2015 to 2021, which was aligned to the broadcast contract, also aligned to the performance cycle and the next World Cup. But we recognise when we introduced that that's a long period of time. So within that strategy, it always envisaged that in 2018 we'd take stock, we'd review the strategy, and we'd see which bits were going ahead really well, many of which Lois has already mentioned in terms of the England team, Denver, Knights going to Papua New Guinea, Challenge Cup double header, lots of things that are going really, really well, but we'd take stock and review that strategy.
Yeah. How does it feel at grassroots level, Julia?
It's really interesting talking, because I mean, I do think international, you know, is brilliant, but as now no longer working at the RFL and a Hull KR fan week in, week out, which obviously has its challenges, I find it quite frustrating as a supporter at the moment. I live in Huddersfield, have to travel to Hull for my games. Fridays and Thursdays are ideal for me going down the M62 motorway. If the game does expand to other countries and they end up playing in Denver and wherever else, I can't afford to, as a spectator, to necessarily go in, week in, week out to watch my team, maybe as a one-off. But as a sort of a spectator on the terraces now, you know, I want to see my team as often as possible. Sometimes I don't go to a Friday game to St Helens because of the M62 motorway, because that's just my, you know, I don't want to sit in traffic, I've had a long day at work, so I'll maybe watch it on Sky, and I understand the broadcasting rights and everything like that, but as a spectator I want to see my team as often as possible, and at the moment it's not, I can't.
These things are never easy, and it's always a case of balancing all of your different stakeholders. You know, ultimately, you know, Rugby League, we have a very good, healthy relationship with Sky. It's important that we schedule matches where it's appropriate for their schedule, for their calendar, balancing that against when fans would prefer to watch their teams. We're always kind of balancing all of these competing demands to make sure we do holistically what's right and best for the game.
And I really understand that, because I launched SkyTry. I was one of the main people when I was a director at the RFL. SkyTry, which obviously, you know, is about the grassroots and about developing young people in the sport from primary school, secondary school, and the women's game and the girls' game. So I understand the balance of that, but now I suppose I'm on the sharp end and I'm wanting to go and watch. I'm a season ticket holder. I don't get to all the games because of when they're scheduled, and it's a frustration. So it's just and I understand the balance, and I understand the money that's come in through Sky. And actually, the foundations a lot of the Rugby League foundations wouldn't have survived, wouldn't be doing the work in the schools without that money. So I'm fully appreciative, but I guess it's from a spectator point of view, it's tough.
Yeah, and what's really positive though is that we're getting some healthy increase in viewing stats for the Thursday nights, for the Friday nights, which again is getting those games out to a wider market, which again will hopefully
Julie makes a
drive.
good point there, though. I mean, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, Hull had back-to-back trips, Hull FC, not Hull KR, back-to-back trips. I think St Helens one week and then Widnes the next week, and the number of travelling fans was significantly down the following week because the previous week they'd all tasted that M62, the roadworks. So is there not a discussion going on with the broadcasters to say, look, let's try and make this a bit easier for the fans? Because, I mean, those roadworks are horrendous. They are absolutely horrendous. We do it every week. I mean, as professionals, we do it every week because we have to do it. We can guarantee we're not getting home till gone midnight because the roads are shut. We have to go off through. I mean, it sounds like a very trite conversation to have, but it's a very relevant conversation.
Yeah,
for fans.
and again, as I say, it's all about balance, isn't it? You know, we've got to work with the broadcaster on the scheduling. You know, ultimately, you know, they don't want all the matches played on a Sunday afternoon because that would only give them one broadcast slot. Equally, I think any club that is relying on away fans for their attendance hasn't, you know, quite got the business model right. You know, for those Thursday nights, you know, probably accept that the majority of fans are going to be your home fans who are going to come and watch the game rather than necessarily being the travelling fans.
Are you excited by the expansion? Are you excited about the possibility of next year we could have matches in Toronto, Super League matches in Toronto, in potentially Toulouse, potentially London, Catalan? Does that excite you?
I can see both sides, to be honest. I can see what you're saying, Julia, is I'm not going to go to them games, but then I think maybe I could go to them games if it's a player. So I'm thinking, you know, if there is the stuff going on in Toronto, is that going to be a better foot in the door for England women to go and play the Canada team and things like that? So I see it from the sort of like the player side of it, the fan side of it. I think it's one of them. At the minute, it's a very mixed bag of what people think and what they think is the priority. You've got people saying like, we need to focus on what's happening here in England. Why are we looking at expanding? And I can get the argument from both sides, but I guess if you are looking at Toronto and places like that and Denver, you are broadening that talent pool, and that might only increase the standard of rugby for USA, which might make the World Cup more competitive. I don't know.
It's talent pool and wider, isn't it? Because new markets apply to broadcasts and to customers and to the talent pool. And we've got to drive forward because we're increasingly you work in a global world, social media, the media, it is globalised now. The more new markets we can get into, not just to potentially find new talent, but also potentially to bring in new revenue streams, which of course, the RFL doesn't exist to make money. We exist to govern the game and invest money within the game. So any new markets we go into that bring new revenues into the sport, would look to reinvest within the sport. So it all kind of, it's that kind of rolling wheel, isn't it?
And you can see that, and you can see the players coming through from the last World Cup. However, just to move on to the sort of match official side, the pressures then when you're moving into Toronto and Denver, because they don't have a pool of match officials up to officiating to that standard. So then you have the UK match officials having to service those games, and I know the challenges with Canada, because it's not just, they do 2 or 3 games a week to these match officials. So then that takes them out the game. So when they're travelling for 5 days to go to Canada and back and things like that, it just put you can hear Steve Ganson already.
Julia, being leading up the operations department, I can absolutely assure you there's lots of logistical challenges that having an international Toronto team in the competition brings, but you look at that and then you look at all the extra publicity, media coverage we've got as a result of Toronto being in that competition, cost neutrally.
Just on the logistics side of things, Toronto, has a plan been set now for Toronto? It looks like they're going to be in the middle eights. When it comes to that end of the season, are they going to be playing home and away, or will they have a chunk of middle eights games in Toronto and then a chunk over here? Has that been planned for yet?
Yeah, we're liaising with the club and with the other clubs who might be in that competition in relation to that. Clearly, we've got to make sure that whatever happens, there isn't any impact on the integrity of the competition. So it might not be an exact home and away, but they'll play the same sequencing, the same teams that any other team in the qualifiers would. Yeah.
So they lose that advantage of having 4 consecutive home games, which they're getting at the moment. They've now got to block about 8 games, haven't they, at home?
Yes, they have. There was certain issues at the start of the season in terms of their availability of their pitch due to the weather, due to the pitch being relayed, which meant that during the regular season they've ended up playing their fixtures very much in 2 different blocks. We haven't committed to Toronto that they'll get the same in the Super 8s. We just need to work through the logistics of that and to see what's right for the competition.
You touched on this a bit, Julia, at the start of this, when we talked about the impact on fans. The problem is that as a sport at the moment, we're drawing from the same 60,000, 70,000 fans, aren't we? And we're saying, right, go to Wembley, right, go to Old Trafford. And those fans are paying to go to Catalan and paying to go to Magic Weekend and paying potentially to go to New York and Toronto. There's only so much money people have, haven't there? That's a concern for the game at the moment.
It is a concern for the game, and I think it's something that needs to be built in. Yes, I think they'll probably go one-off to America or to Canada, and it'll be a really great trip. And I think it's been seen by France. Fans can't afford to go every year, so they pick and choose which games they actually attend according to their income. And actually, we draw from people with different income streams, and a lot can't afford to go. So I do think we need to build it in. I think it needs to be a thought of the regular fan. I think there is a need for the game to expand, and it's finding that balance, a passion for the sport where I want it to be played worldwide, but also a real sympathy for those people that can't afford to do that. And actually, I know people that haven't been able to go to the Challenge Cup games, for instance, because they actually have to pay for them rather than the season tickets, because of the income that they get in. They just can't afford it.
Yeah.
So it is balancing that.
Yeah, the foundation, you'll get a lot of fans' views as well. I mean, what's their opinion about the Challenge Cup? Because there wasn't a great crowd. It looked okay on tape, but it wasn't a great crowd at Featherstone, was it, for Leeds against Lee?
I think it's one of them, isn't it? I think we see the difficulty of getting kids on board. So obviously we do all the pre-match entertainment and half-time entertainment. And I think that when it's not a scheduled game, you're actually you're on the back foot because you can't try and chase it, and then obviously with the change in venue. So I think it wasn't really a home game, was it, in a sense? So people are going to have to travel further. But I think, like you said, that's the climate that we're in, aren't we? That if it's not on your season ticket and you've already gone to that, then that's where you're at. But I think that were a difficult one, and it was just one of those things where the cricket were on at Headingley, you're bound by that, and they got on with it and they did it well, and it seemed like an alright crowd, not the best, no. But that's just the nature of the beast, I guess.
We're throwing all the brick rats at you. Apologies, because you've got the RFL tag next to your name. So I'm going to throw this one at you. Brilliant idea for the double header at Bolton. That makes that an event now, that semi-final. But what kind of consideration is being given to the Challenge Cup in terms of free tickets, in terms of incorporating in season tickets at clubs so that, the Challenge Cup is already paid for? Is that an issue with the Challenge Cup?
Yeah, I think the Challenge Cup, look, we've just had two fantastic quarterfinals on the BBC over the weekend. You and I were both at the one on Sunday. Amazing atmosphere, amazing game, good attendance. I think we always keep everything under review. So again, looking at the Challenge Cup, we'll always look at different ideas in terms of driving that competition forward, making sure that it remains relevant and vibrant. And the double-header semi-final is part of that. I really hope that there'll be neutral fans who look at those two games and think, wow, this is going to be a really, really good day out. It doesn't matter that I don't follow any of those four teams.
Yeah.
I want to be there because it's an event.
Yeah.
And part of the challenge, Julie, coming back to you, is that we can't keep going back to the same fans expecting them to spend money, which is why the whole drive forward is to make sure that we get into new markets, be that new clubs where they build up their own fan base, or be that we get into the event going market so that people who just like coming to big events start coming to Rugby League events as well. Again, so we're not keeping going back to the same people.
And I think it is a mixture, and I do understand the drive. I just sometimes have a real sympathy for the week in, week out, all the live fans that really want to go and watch the teams for different games. And I think it's just having that there's two markets there. And I know the Canadian team, 3 or 4 people that I know from Canada who now attend who would never have attended.
Yeah, which is fantastic. And I know the semi-finals are a success because my daughter rang me up and said, get me tickets for her and her boyfriend. So, and she's no interest in Rugby League whatsoever. So it's clearly a success having that double header. Thank you to your 3. That's as far as we go this week. But a quick reminder of what you can catch on these channels. So our next bit of action as far as live Rugby League is concerned, Saturday the 9th of June, 9:30 p.m. Make a note in your diary. It's Toronto Wolfpack back in Toronto at the Lamport Stadium up against the London Broncos. And if you want to keep up to date with what's happening on this channel, then go to our website, www.freesports.tv. Don't forget that S, freesports.tv. TV. But that's as far as we go this week. A very big thank you to our guests as well. Julia Lee, former referee, Karen Moorehouse from the RFL, and Lois Forsell, power to your elbow with the Leeds Rhinos and England national team as well. And good luck, we'll see you before, but good luck for 2021 as well. We're back with another in a week's time.